How are Aussies building wealth today?
I am a freelance journalist. I am a founder of the Could You Run Club. I am a content creator.
20 grams of protein, best finish to an epic day.
Went to university to go become an architect.
Getting to that point of earning $300,000 a year.
I'm trying to use my inheritance to help me get to semi-retirement by the time I'm about 45.
I feel like I missed some kind of class on investment.
Is Australia a good country to build wealth?
It has been, but it's got to be harder in the future.
I love Australia. It's the best country in the world. It's a bloody good country.
Julian, when you were in your mid-20s, you were earning $300,000 a year. What were you doing?
I was the general manager of a finance company that helped small business owners and everyday Australians access the cheapest rates from, car loans, personal loans, business loans. I was employee number one in that business, so I actually helped build that from the ground up. My first role, I was earning $38,000 a year, all the way to, building value, demonstrating my skills, my network, my connections, working basically every single weekend for over 10 years. That was sort of how I got started, and that's sort of what my trajectory of my career was.
At 26, you walked away from the job. Why?
Before I started in that finance brokerage, I was studying web and app development. And so I wanted to digitise the entire process for, loan applications and help Aussies get access to the best rates from over 90 lenders. And so that is like why I quit. COVID was another catalyst to that. It seemed like at that point in time, there was never going to be a better opportunity for me to start from scratch and have a little bit of a safety net. Essentially what I did was I used some of the personal savings, my life savings, my family's life savings, and I withdrew some super, which you could do at the time. And that was the seed capital that allowed me to start my own business and solve those problems I wanted to and sort of, live out this purpose of trying to get, the whole entire loan process digitised and democratised.
Going back to sort of that salary that you walked away from, $300,000 is not a bad salary, especially in your 20s. Did you think you could earn more working for yourself?
Yeah, naively. I thought starting my own business, I was putting in huge hours. So, not to harp on it, but I was working every single weekend. I missed out and sacrificed so much. I didn't have a passport until I was 23 and got married. My honeymoon was the first time I ever went overseas. So I was working ridiculous hours, so many days, lots of overtime, lots of bonuses, lots of anything I could do to sort of try and get myself ahead and build a great life for, my future family and also help and support my mother. So I was working, I was, helping pay bills in the house when I was living at home. And that to me was a big motivator and a big driver because I saw my mum, she was a single mum, raised 5 kids. I saw her really struggle financially and I just knew that anything that I could do to help would be, worth it. So putting in those massive hours and stuff, I thought if I start my own business, I could work less hours. I'm certainly not a 9-to-5 person, but I thought I wouldn't need to do 80-hour weeks like almost every single week and work every weekend. And so that was a naive assumption. I work as much or more than I have ever starting my own business, and now my salary is less than half of what I was earning then. So
you also refinanced your home a couple of times?
I refinanced the family home that I own and twice, and also sold a bunch of personal investments, shares, crypto, a significant amount of crypto. I also, before starting the business, sold a crypto mining rig that I'd built and sort of self-taught how to do that. So I was always, growing up, I was trying to find ways to, build wealth. And so I dabbled in shares, I dabbled in crypto. So all of those things kind of had to get set aside to build a business, which now employs, over 40 Aussies.
Alex, you're 26 and you employ 8 people in your photography and media company. Did you always plan on becoming a photographer?
No, it started as a side hustle for me. So I went to university to go become an architect, did a full bachelor's, full master's degree. I've never worked a day in my life as an architect.
Wow.
Literally had it, to kind of a bit of a side hustle, kind of helped me through uni, a few 18th through 21st there. Kind of kept snowballing as it went. I got to the last year of my master's and I was making more doing the photography part-time than my mates were earning as architects working full-time. So literally, towards the end of my university degree, university was like getting in the way. I was missing lectures, missing classes to go shoot commercial jobs here and there. As soon as university finished, doubled down on it, rapidly expanded it, went from me to a team of 6 in about 6 months. and then been about full-time now for about 3 years.
Growing up, what were your expectations around making money and success?
It was always you work hard in school, you go to university, you get a good job, and that's kind of, that was the lineage that you kind of follow.
Did you feel, in a way, obligated to your parents? You went through private school, they spent a lot of money on that to sort of make sure that you did well by them?
100%. Like you look back of how much they invested in your education.
You also invest in the share market. When did you become interested in that?
So probably I picked it up in about 2019. Had a tip-off from a mate at university. He was telling me about his dad's investments in some colonial first estate. And basically I went down a rabbit hole for about a year just on YouTube, self-taught, a few Instagram reels here and there. I basically taught myself everything. Didn't buy my first actual investment until September the 3rd, 2020.
Wow, you remember the date.
Yes.
Katie, you describe yourself as a serial hustler. What does that mean?
I only recently found out that I'm neurospicy. So
Neurospicy.
So my whole life I always had a ton of things going on all at the same time. And that's just how life worked out for me. I had a mum who also had the same brain as me and always had juggled a few things.
What kind of jobs have you had?
I was a financial planner for 13 years and I was a makeup artist for 10. Dabbled in all sorts of businesses, so beauty business. I also babysit and run like a playgroup for kids and just whatever that is piquing my interest at the time.
Where did your passion for business come from?
Growing up, my parents were refugees, and so when they came to Australia, they had a limited skill set, and so they were forced to be self-employed and open businesses to make money. My dad was a forklift driver, and my mum opened business after business after business, and so I saw both sides of how to make money. And to me, when anyone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? For me, I just thought everyone worked to make money.
Tara, you also run multiple businesses. How do you make your money?
I am a freelance journalist. I am a founder of the Could You Run Club. I also founded another run club called the Singles Run Club. I am a content creator. I am an ambassador for some brands, and I am a run coach as well. So a lot of different plates I'm spinning, and I absolutely love it.
Have you always been drawn to freelance work?
I think I was drawn very early on to a flexible lifestyle. Both my parents are shift workers. My mum is a paediatric nurse. My dad is a police officer. And I never saw a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 in my household. And I saw a lot of sacrifice my parents made to have that lifestyle, but I saw so many benefits. It just drew me to it. So when I was in a position where I lost what I thought was my dream job, full-time work, I was inspired by another freelance journalist to take the biggest risk of my life and say no to another full-time job in journalism and take this risk and become a freelancer. And there is no way on earth that I would have had this incredible life that I now lead without taking that huge risk.
So what kind of life have you had since you went freelance?
I work when I want to work. I've never had to ask anyone for a day of annual leave, and it's just been such a joy to lead this life.
One of your income sources is this run club based in Sydney's eastern suburbs. We joined you one Sunday morning.
What I love about Coogee is the lifestyle. It's such a beautiful place to be around. There's a lot of movement, there's a lot of people like me who want to go out, experience life and travel the world. I think people who live here aren't following that typical white picket fence trend.
31K!
I find that so empowering.
Well done, everyone! All right, let's do a group photo.
Let's go!
My apartment is $1.3 million because I am one street back from the beach.
Do you own property in Coogee?
No, absolutely not. I definitely would not be able to buy in Coogee, but I can live in it for $700 a week. I probably pay a little bit more than the average person, but I'm happy to pay that because I get to live where I want to live and I can hear the waves of the ocean as I go to sleep.
Can I please get a latte decaf with skim milk? Yes, thank you.
You have so much around you, bars, cafes, restaurants, all of that.
Cheers.
Buying a house is absolutely not on my agenda. What is going to Europe once a year, spending $10,000 on travel and saying yes anytime anyone asks me to go out. And Botox every 3 months.
Having a mortgage would absolutely cripple those dreams. I'd be living somewhere where I don't probably want to live, miles away from my friends, and that's just not a sacrifice that I want to make right now.
20 grams of protein, best finish to an epic day.
I don't feel embarrassed or ashamed about the fact that I'm 37, I don't have children, I'm not looking to buy a home. I feel very fortunate that I don't have any dependents right now, apart from a little fluffy cat. I don't have a mortgage, I don't have a full-time job, so I don't really have anything to stress about. I don't have a 5-year plan, I don't have a 1-month plan, I live day to day and I couldn't be happier.
Tara, do you think you'll own property one day?
Maybe one day.
In terms of purchasing property, do you have a sense of how you do it, how it works?
Go to a bank, speak to someone who knows. That's about as far as I know. I mean, I don't even know how to get a mortgage without a full-time job. I guess I have to show my savings. It's all beyond the realms of what even I need to think about right now. I enjoy renting. I enjoy being able to say, yep, I want to move to the UK tomorrow. I love that idea of that I'm not locked into somewhere and that I have the flexibility and freedom to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it.
Glenn, you're a financial advisor. Do many of us feel property is out of reach?
I'm not going to shy away from the fact for younger Australians, it is incredibly hard to get into the property market. However, I do believe that with a strategy, it is possible. It might not be the forever home on day one, but building wealth through property is certainly one way that we have seen it work.
You specialise in working with clients who are aged between 20 and 45. Mm-hmm. Is the path to wealth changing in Australia?
The traditional go to school, find your high school sweetheart, buy a house, have kids, stay in the same job for 40 years, then retire and then sail off into a yacht is not what our members want. They do want to travel. They do want to start a family. Property still is a big part of the equation. And what we've found though is although those in their 20s, 30s may potentially be comfortable to continue to rent, there's kind of two pivots. The first is when they have children. That's when often people go, maybe I do want my own place, because the consideration around school catchment areas starts to come into effect. The other is when I start to, we start to challenge them on the thought process around renting. So renting in your 20s, renting in your 30s. We then pray, are you comfortable renting in your 40s? Would you be comfortable renting in your 50s? Often the answer is no. So money can be very overwhelming. There's different degrees of financial literacy. Some are very interested in it. Some are completely uninterested in it. However, the reality is money touches everything. The greater the degree of kind of discipline and control and structure you have around how you manage your money, that will inevitably lead to greater freedom, flexibility and choice. But there needs to be a balance and a trade-off there.
Andy, you've been working in HR for the last 5 years. Can you relate to this idea from Glenn about sort of managing money and being financially sort of responsible?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 28 now, but I remember back in the day I used to work hospo, used to do admin work, used to do research work. It was all really casual work, so there was never really a consistent kind of stream of money. It was only until about 5 years ago where I graduated from uni and got my first big boy job. I started working in HR for the government, and with that came a steady stream of income. You suddenly get a salary, which is really nice. And with that, steady stream of income, you can start doing things. So I put together my own little budget, and I spent a lot of time, making sure I've got all the categories, I've color coordinated and everything. I did all of that to give me a good sense of where my money's coming from and where it's going. By setting up a budget for myself, I was able to, regularly put away money for my savings. I was able to start buying ETFs for the first time, which is really exciting. That sense of financial responsibility that you kind of get. I even started looking into things like my superannuation as well. I made sure that I was, investing it aggressively because I was young and I had time to ride out the market. So it all kind of came in a nice little package,
How does it feel to watch your money so closely?
There's a lot of ups and downs when you put your money to work. But overall, as you keep a budget, and I've kept my budget for about 5 years now, you kind of ride out those ups and downs, and you realise, in general, the line tends to just go up. I know friends, and I know, like, I've seen on Instagram, like, people really obsess over these sorts of things. You know, they really focus and lock into, you know, how to get the best deal, or what's the best points hacks, or, you know, what loyalty program should I sign up to? And that's all well and good, but having done my budget for a couple of years and having seen stocks and having seen my superannuation go up and down, like, in general, it just goes up generally.
Your parents immigrated from Vietnam and raised you in Australia. What were their hopes for you?
I think having lived like a really, you know, challenging life and realising the challenges of making money, I think they wanted me to have a better life. Certainly a better life than what they had, you know. And the hope was that, you know, we'd be able to all go to uni, we'd all be able to get nice, cushy jobs, jobs that weren't, you know, working long hours, working on the weekends, working night shift. You know, they really wanted us to be successful. And yeah, I think that's, you know, a wonderful gift that they've been able to give us, you know, to have that chance to make a life for ourselves. And I really appreciate that.
Enos, you came to Australia 15 years ago with your family. How are you feeling about getting ahead?
My parents migrated from Sri Lanka in 2011. Basically, it was the both of them in their early 40s, coming with 3 kids, to start from scratch, essentially, in Australia, right? Trying to find a stable job, just renting the same house for the last 16 years. So getting ahead, it was more so making use of the opportunities my parents put me and my 2 brothers in. In terms of getting ahead and building wealth, I learnt from an early age to do so. You had to start investing early, and that's how I saw that approach and took it myself.
You're a mortgage broker. What have you seen intergenerational wealth do for other home buyers?
A lot of my first home buyer or younger home buyer clients use the ability to use their parents' property as security and use that family guarantor approach to enter the property market earlier. So that's one strategy out of many. Like, other forms is obviously getting assistance in terms of your deposit, whether it's a gift or a loan, interest-free loan from your parents. And then something as simple as living at home rent-free for a certain duration of time can help you enter the market sooner.
You're 23. What are you working towards?
My end goal is similar to a lot of people here in terms of that great Australian dream, owning my own home, building my family and raising them up in a nice neighbourhood. So that's my end goal in 10 years' time or so, where I would like to afford a house in Sydney.
Are you confident that you'll get there?
Look, there have been a few hiccups along the way with budget changes and high interest rate markets and all that stuff. But look, you just got to keep moving with it and find a different strategy around it.
You've bought an investment property and you've been able to do that by sort of living with parents. Has that helped?
Absolutely. And I want to use that strategy to obviously get to that stage where I can support my new family and my current one.
Jessica, you're also saving to buy your own home. What's that process been like for you?
It's been really challenging over the years. I feel like the amount of deposit that I will need keeps moving, like the goalposts keep shifting. So I've been working and I'm doing my masters at the same time, and it's been a big hustle, and I don't think I'm anywhere near affording home. So yeah, it's been very challenging.
You've been renting for the last 17 years. Have you ever calculated how much has gone into rent?
I have. It is $175,000 that I've spent on other people's mortgages, which in hindsight, like, I wish I had stayed at home longer.
You're 34, you're studying a master's in art therapy. Did you expect to own a home by this stage of your life?
I sort of watched my grandparents and my parents, like, both with blue-collar jobs and minimal savings, like, both bought a house and raised 3 kids. And it was never a consideration when I was going through school that I would be in the position where I am now, where I'm still renting. The sort of narrative was always, you know, you go to university, get a good job. And my parents and my grandparents really wanted me to go to university because they didn't take that opportunity when they were younger. I thought that having a university degree would have helped me get a better job by now. Yeah.
You originally wanted to work in construction.
Yes.
What happened to that?
I originally wanted to be a bricklayer, which is pretty funny to think about, a 4'11" bricklayer, but here we are. And my teachers encouraged me to go to university. They didn't want me to waste, I guess, academic success. So I was set on that path quite early, and I don't regret my time at university. I think it was really helpful to navigate the world, and I learnt so much. It's just that I don't think realistically that is the way to build wealth. I wish I had got a job in construction and started building wealth that way.
Chris, you're an economist. How do Australians build their wealth generally?
We all love hearing about get rich quick. The safe and smart way is get rich slow, get the best possible income that you can, and sometimes that might mean working overtime, or it might mean studying more so that the income is in the future. But from that, save as much as you can, get that money, stack it away, get the best return on it you can. In Australia, we have a system that means you get a terrible return if you're putting your money in a bank and earning interest, but you get a rather better return in housing and in super. So it's no surprise the average Australian wealth is 2/3 of it is housing, and much of the rest is superannuation.
Is it harder to build wealth in today's economy?
It really is. And three things stand out. One is wealth has already roared. And so the success that there's been in wealth, which has mostly gone to the people who already had money, who are, on average, older Australians. But there's been so much success in wealth, it makes it harder for that to continue. Wealth has to make sense relative to the income that we earn, and that the rubber band that holds those two things together is already pretty stretched. So it's hard for wealth to do amazing things relative to our income. And our incomes are growing more slowly than they used to. The disposable incomes in Australia after inflation over the last decade have grown at about 1/3 the rate you've seen on average in the rich world. And our politicians, both sides, they're not terribly helping around that. The last thing is that the politicians have, over the past decade and in the budget, started to close or pull back on some of the lurks and loopholes in everything from housing to superannuation. So that combination says, it's going to be harder in the future.
Alex, how would you describe your spending habits?
I would say I used to be a lot more frugal. Now I'm not as frugal.
Right.
But it's definitely very structured.
Do you think it's harder to make money these days?
I think we have a lot more opportunity than ever before in order to make money. We live in a highly digitised world. With me, my majority of my business runs on Instagram. People just send me a DM, hey, I want coverage for this. I organise the photography team, the videography team, whatever they need. Would I say it's easier? It's probably not easier. I'd say it's different, but at the end of the day, we all get the same 24 hours. It's what you make of it. If I want to work for all 24 hours, I'll get paid for those 24 hours and build kind of what I want to. If you want to sit back and not be proactive about it, that's up to you.
Letitia, you grew up with a single mum and your brother. What was your family's financial situation?
My mum worked very hard to purchase a house when I was about 6 or 7 years old. She saved up for a long time to get a deposit. This was in the early 2000s, so it was maybe a bit easier then for a single female. She was a teacher to do something like that. And she worked really hard to pay the mortgage and renovate the house and make sure we had a pretty stable life and childhood. And we lived on a pretty strict budget as well. She would make sure we ate all the food in the house. There was never any food wastage. We went to a public school. We had holidays were just camping or things like that. Yeah, it was pretty budget lifestyle.
Your mum stopped being able to work when you were in grade 6. Why?
She had cancer. She was diagnosed with cancer about a year or two after she purchased our family home. And then, 4 or 5 years later, she stopped being able to work. So that was a bit of a stress on the family. She started to rent out rooms in our house. It was a 5-bedroom house. So she had at one point 3 international students living in the house, and they helped to pay the mortgage.
And you also got a job as soon as you could,
Yes,
as well
I
as
was
your
working
brother?
at Macca's from as soon as when I quit. I think it's 14 and 9 months you can get a job legally in Australia. So I started working at Macca's and I paid my own way, and so did my brother.
You were able to get some Centrelink money. At 18, that stopped. How did you feel when you had to kind of, I don't know, start paying rent and start having to do all that on your own?
Yeah, well, my mum started charging me rent when I was 18 because she stopped getting Centrelink money for me being a minor. And I thought that was really unfair at the time because none of my friends were paying rent, and how dare she charge me rent to live at home. But now obviously I understand why she needed to charge me rent. It was so that she could keep the house and keep paying down the mortgage while she wasn't able to work.
When you were 23, your mum died, leaving you and your brother her house. What did that inheritance mean to you?
It meant a lot. Like, I think we didn't actually think about the fact that we would ever get an inheritance because we had planned that the house would be used to look after my mum if she had to go into care. It was honestly a bit of a surprise and a bit of a shock that when she passed away, it was like, okay, we have a house now. What do we do with this? Like, I'd already moved out of home. My brother was living with my mum to care for her, but obviously he wasn't going to stay there. So yeah, we started to go down the route of trying to figure out what to do with the house. Thankfully, I had a really good friend and mentor who was an accountant, and he kind of coached me through the whole process and like the safest and best way to manage the house and the inheritance that we would eventually get.
What did you then do with that inheritance money?
So eventually I bought an apartment, and my intention was to live in that apartment for as long as possible, but life changes and I had a baby and moved closer to my partner's work, so now it's an investment property. So I never intended to own an investment property, but here I am with an investment property.
Enosh, you've bought an investment property. Your dream is to buy and live in a home in Sydney. What's your next step?
I have a bit of a strategy which I've kind of developed working within the industry and also having that interest in the property market to essentially build the equity within the property, because hypothetically a median house in a nice area in Sydney, it's let's say 2.5 mil right now. In 10 years time, if we're lucky, let's say it's 3 mil, right? So typically you need a 20% deposit plus cost for that 3 mil property. 20% of 3 mil, it's about 600K. It's not a lot of 30-year-olds or 33-year-olds I know that just have 600K lying around. So the approach I wanted to follow was to actually build up that equity through investments such as property, and using the leverage and the ability to leverage through property to get to that point where 10 years time I have the actual equity or the deposit to sort out one part of the puzzle in terms of getting into that home. So look, in terms of the second investment property, the plan was to purchase one this year as well. And when the budget announcement happened, a big component was that around the changes for negative gearing, and that reduced my personal borrowing capacity by around 20%. And similarly, a lot of younger buyers and a lot of clients of mine who are highly leveraged against their properties lose that benefit as well. So that obviously reduces the amount you could buy for, and that reduces the purchase price you could target, which puts things on hold if you can't find a property within that price range.
Glenn, you're a financial advisor. This year's budget announced changes to the way investment properties are taxed. What's different for someone like Enosh?
Two primary things that have gone through is, one, the ability to negative gear established properties has been removed. So previously, if you had a property that was generating, let's say, $25,000 of income and the expenses, including interest strata, was $35,000, there was $10,000 that you could then use to deduct against your income that you got through work. The second is the removal of the 50% capital gains tax discount. So in short, if you purchased a property, it went up by $100,000, you would then get a 50% discount and pay tax on the remaining 50%. So that's no longer the case. What will happen is the property will be assessed and increased based on inflation, and then the minimum tax that you would pay on that investment property for an existing dwelling would be 30%.
And now negative gearing is restricted to new builds, is that correct?
Correct.
And the changes also don't affect properties that were bought before?
Before the budget, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Alex, you bought your first property a few weeks ago. Did the budget have an impact on you?
After the proposal for the budget, I tried to close on a property within 48 hours. Up until 5 p.m. when the hours before the budget. Terrible process. Highly don't recommend that.
Sounds stressful.
Yeah, not good. So I ended up missing out on that property. I ended up purchasing a property a few weeks ago now, which was offered to me originally. After the budget kind of came out, the market has kind of pulled back significantly. I ended up getting it about 150 grand cheaper than what they originally offered it to me at. Took it as a good opportunity. That money, which would have been spent on the down payment, now becomes capital in which I can use for renovations. I'm going to use those renovations to generate equity and get the snowball rolling.
Jessica, you've been renting for 17 years and you do hope to buy your own home one day. Do the budget changes help you?
I think that they will definitely help me when buying a house. I have friends who've recently managed to purchase a house and, like all of the investment people, were no longer at the auction. So it's very helpful for me and friends that I have that rely on homes as shelter rather than investments. So I'm hoping by the time I get my deposit together, the budget changes will help me buy a house where I'm not necessarily competing against a whole bunch of investors, and just other home buyers would be helpful.
Chris, you're an economist. Do you think these changes will affect housing affordability long term?
Not enormously. The dollars sound big, but Australians have $12 trillion of housing. So if you think of it as, we've made these tax changes and how big a lever are we? Well, they're trying to move a very big rock. What they are doing is making the cost of financing housing higher than otherwise as a result of the tax changes. Don't forget the Reserve Bank's been doing that with interest rate rises for a while too. And that higher cost of money has not stopped housing prices continuing to rise. The problem with housing affordability in Australia goes deeper. Right? For 40 years, Australia's housing policy has been the word no. Right? No, you can't build that. No, you can't build it here. Don't even think of doing this. And as we've kept saying no to stuff, or on the rare occasions where we say yes, but here's all the rules and regulations that make it expensive, we have priced out the next generation from stuff.
There's not enough housing.
No, and that worries me, because to some extent we're talking here about, how much money is chasing housing, and these changes aren't big about the amount of money changing housing. We need to change the amount of housing in Australia, and that is a much harder political fight. It means that older, richer residents in a given street or suburb or council area have to be convinced that stuff should happen around them. That is the longer term solution, but the real problem with that is it's a slow solution. There is no magic wand. We have not just waved it. It's going to take time to make housing in Australia more affordable.
The budget also received a lot of attention over revisions to capital gains tax, particularly for businesses. What has changed there?
So say you start a small business from scratch and it goes well, and you sell it for $1 million. Well, under the existing system, the very maximum amount you could be taxed on that $1 million capital gain is a little under $250,000. Under the new system, when it kicks in, you could, at least theoretically, be charged up to $500,000. So, that's a big difference. It's not quite as big as it sounds, though. You get to adjust for inflation. There are some other things. And what we are talking about is, for those who've had a success, how much do they get to keep of that success? And that's important. But to me, the more important thing is actually convincing more Australians to have a go, to try something, whether it's have a go at work and earn more money and not have income tax maybe take out as much. Or, yes, we do want people to have a go at setting up a business and so on, but what really can change there, the things that kill young businesses early are where you just don't have the money, the cash flow. And some of the things that aren't making the headlines, the changes around lost refundability, lost carryback, instant asset depreciation, now permanent, those sort of things are helpful. I think they should probably do more. But in some ways, some of the things that really grab the headlines are maybe grabbing a little too much at the headlines.
Julian, you started a loan business 6 years ago. After the budget, you posted some AI-generated images to social media. Let's have a look at those. How did that come about?
The situation was that when the budget actually got announced, I was watching it and waiting for this moment for them to say, yep, it's just, capital gains tax changes are just to property, but they applied it to all asset classes. And that was really left me deflated. So over the last 6 years, the amount of blood, sweat and tears, the amount of times I've almost had the business collapse because we've run out of cash. Refinanced the home, sold crypto that I've had since 2017, drained the kids' bank accounts. So, I was very deflated. It was really an emotional moment for me. And so it was really sitting on me heavy. And I was like, basically what's just happened is I've started this business, I've taken all the risk, I have invested all of my own personal wealth into this business. And now I have a co-founder that I never asked for. And my reality is I'm going to have to give the government, and obviously it's tongue-in-cheek, Albanese is not getting the 47%, the government is, but effectively overnight inherited a business partner that we never asked for. And in my situation, all of the reinvestment back into the business is because one day there will be some intellectual property value that the tech business has. And if somebody, much bigger player goes to take it off my hands because I've grown it to a level that I just don't have the skills and capability to grow it to the very next level, they would write a check and take, maybe a 51% stake in the business, and I could still be involved, and everybody gets to keep their wonderful employment, and all the staff that got employee share options along the way would be rewarded for that sale. And, their changes applied, on the budget night to our employees. So I sent our content team a message and I said, I've got this idea for a post, can you put this together? My new co-founder, Albo, 47%, sent a draft. I said, yeah, great, let's do it. And then we posted it to Instagram, and some other people, jumped on the idea. And then before we knew it, it was on everybody's feed. And it was my new co-founder. And it went viral for a reason. I think a lot of business owners, the way that I was feeling was the same way that a lot of Aussie small businesses were feeling, and medium to large businesses too. Like these changes were done with no consultation before they were announced, or very little. That's how it unfolded.
How did you sort of feel about this idea of aspiration when you heard about the changes?
If I'd known all of that, I probably wouldn't have started my own business, and Australia wouldn't have the business that we've created. That's the reality of the situation. Is if it makes me feel that way, why would so many other Aussies want to start businesses and want to take all this risk and want to miss out on the sort of climbing the corporate ladder and building the personal wealth?
Katie, you run several small businesses. How do you feel about the changes in the budget?
I think a lot of people won't have the motivation to start businesses because the math doesn't add up if you put the risk and the reward. And I think for people who are already investing and already business owners, I think that we could look elsewhere. One of the reasons why my parents chose Australia to migrate to was the economy, because they knew that back in Vietnam, to have a child there was to give them no opportunity. And it's very ironic because right now, if they were to go back to Vietnam, or if I was to go back to Vietnam as an expat, my lifestyle will be a lot better. Housing's more affordable, education's better, food, the affordability of food and the access to even your medical standards there. So it's just, I find it really ironic that my parents came for the economy, and now because I have a young child, I'm now reassessing whether Australia is the better place for investors and business owners and people who want to build something and have a life that has purpose in what they do.
So you're considering potentially moving to Vietnam?
I think it's definitely on the cards. It makes sense to want to move somewhere where your lifestyle is sort of a better standard, where your opportunities are there for people who want to live a life where they have options.
Andy, like Katie, your family is also from Vietnam. Have you been tempted to leave Australia to get rich?
No. I've had quite a few friends who've had similar thoughts to the people in this room. They're trying to start up businesses and they're having these thoughts of disappearing to other countries. And so I'm sympathetic to these ideas for sure, but personally, I can't say I'd agree with that. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not people are able to build wealth, whether people feel wealthy at the moment. And I appreciate there's a lot of cost of living pressures going on, there's lots of inflationary pressures. But taking all of that into consideration, I would say I most definitely do feel incredibly wealthy. And that, I think, comes from the fact that I've been able to reflect on like where my parents have come from and where I am right now, you know. My parents came to the country, couldn't speak English. They didn't have an educational background, and they worked blue-collar jobs. I'm here talking on national television. I love yapping. I can speak a lot of English. I went to school, I got my university degree, I got my first class honours. I ended up getting a fancy grad job out of university, and I got a nice, really stable white-collar job. I think in every conception of the word, I'm incredibly wealthy. And I think that absolutely applies to, I guess, the perspective in Australia. I think we're an incredibly wealthy country. I think we're such a fortunate place to be in. I love Australia. It's the best country in the world. It's a bloody good country. And I couldn't imagine living anywhere else.
If you could sum up living in Australia in one line, what would you say?
Bloody good.
Bloody good.
A corporate 9-to-5 gig ensures that you've got enough money in the bank to, put towards your savings. But I just remember thinking that there might have been a bit more to life.
Okay, xin chào quý vị.
So I made sure to sign up to some volunteering. One of the groups that we're with today is the Vietnamese seniors group. It's a good chance for them to connect. If I am going to be honest though, I think most of them are actually here for the karaoke. So I was a little bit anxious about jumping into volunteering. Working in corporate, like I can write an email, I can write meeting minutes, I can chair one hell of a meeting. But I didn't know if any of these skills kind of translated out into the real world.
That's a big one. I'd say I'd go 5 maybe.
The great thing about volunteering is that it really kind of shifts your focus. I can help create an environment where people can share a meal together, and that's quite special.
Handsome.
Handsome.
Me?
Handsome.
Me?
I remember there was one week where one of the clients turns to me and says, "Andy, you are the spitting image of my son. You've got the same laugh, you've got the same kind of smile. You remind me a lot of him." So her son had actually passed away. When she told me that, I kind of had to take a step back, and it's what an honor it is to remind a mother about the son that she'd lost. When I started volunteering, I knew that I'd be doing some driving. I knew that I'd be doing some cooking, but I didn't know that that's something you could offer another person. No, I'm not getting rich in terms of dollars and cents. And so I learned really quickly that the work that you get paid to do isn't always worth doing. And in the same vein, work that's worth doing isn't always paid for.
Andy, your migrant parents emphasise studying and getting a professional job. Have you told them about your new circumstances?
Yeah, so I told them that I had quit my job only a couple weeks ago, and it was after quite a bit of build-up. There was quite a lot of nerves and a lot of tension, and so yeah, it was a big moment for me, I think.
How did they react?
Different perspectives, I think. Mum kind of understood a little bit more about, wanting to find out more in life, wanting to, meet your potential, wanting to chase your dreams. On the flip side, of course, Dad was a bit more hesitant. He was very much of the idea that, what are you going to do for money? Are you going to be able to get a job that pays you the same amount of leave, same amount of super contributions? And I think that's absolutely fair. But I think where it left me was, I know that it's a big risk to take, but I think this is probably the right time to do it.
Do you worry that taking time out of the workforce will affect your future financially?
Yeah, I think it is definitely something that you think about, is it going to affect my wealth? Is it going to affect my future career prospects? Am I ever going to get another job? All of those things definitely do apply. I guess what I'm kind of comforted by is, having done a budget for so many odd years and having kept track of my expenses, I get the general sense that the number generally goes up, and, sometimes there are dips, sometimes things go really well, but overall it kind of just evens out. And I think that absolutely applies to my own life as well, I think at the age of 28, I'm taking a step back from my career. I'm going to look for other things to do. It's probably a time where, the finances are going to take a dip. But I think over the long term of everything going on, I think I'll find my feet, or at least I'm quite hopeful that I'll find my feet.
Tara, you're 37. You haven't followed a traditional life path. Looking back, is there anything you would do differently?
Absolutely not. I have created very proudly an 11 out of 10 life, and I couldn't dream of doing anything different. Life is so short. We've heard tonight about a daughter who's lost a mother who's lost a son, and money is all well and good in the bank, but it is just a dollar figure. Wealth to me isn't that dollar figure. It is life experiences. It is living life to the fullest. It's the memories, moments, the travel that you take away from what life is. I said earlier that my mum showed me how to live a life that wasn't Monday to Friday, but she also showed me that the world is wide and we have a duty to go out and explore it. So I've had some of the most amazing experiences all around the world. I lived in London for 6 years. In that period, I did 55 trips around Europe. You can't tell me that someone in their mid-20s living in Australia could be able to do that, for example. So I've gone out there and I've just had so much fun. And yes, I do worry about the future. I do make sure I save and put money into my superannuation. And that is a big thing that I do think about. And being in this room tonight, it is very intimidating. I'm surrounded by a lot of people who seemingly majority have their stuff together, and I don't feel like that, but I'm going to come away from this thinking I live in an 11 out of 10 life, and I'm so happy with that.
Letitia, your mum died when you were 23. You used your inheritance to buy an investment property. Where would you be without that inheritance?
Probably in a similar position to a lot of my peers, saving or feeling like purchasing a property was out of reach.
How does it feel to have sort of that financial security but not be able to share it with your mum?
Yeah, I do feel wealthy in some ways, but yeah, you can't put a cost or you can't put a price on having your mum around.
You're interested in something called FIRE. What is that?
Yes, it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So it's just using your finances to give yourself freedom and retire early, not waiting till you're 65 or 67. So I'm trying to use my inheritance or my head start, I guess, to help me get to maybe semi-retirement by the time I'm about 45 or 50. But obviously having a child, things kind of slow down a little bit because you can't work and you can't invest in all of those avenues to try and get to retirement. So, yeah.
Did you sort of plan to semi-retire, say, when your son was a teenager, or did you have a fixed goal in mind?
Yeah, I think it was always 45, but now I think that age is going to be stretched out a little bit because I'm not working, and I don't want to be working full time and hustling and saving while my son is little. I want to be around and looking after him.
Alex, you started a successful photography business while you were at uni and recently bought an investment property. What are you working towards now?
I think ultimately is planning for my retirement. I've worked out the compound interest calculator of how much I need by X date. Ultimately, for me to be what I'm kind of working towards next is accumulating that asset base and that wealth base. For me, I've always said my number is 10 mil. That's my exit. 10 mil liquid invested in the stock market. With about a 4% dividend, you're living on about 400,000 a year. I've always said the sweet spot's about 30 grand a month, where you can live a very liberating and very fruitful life. Whether I hit that at 45 or not, will I still keep working 100%? But not working to hustle and be focusing on cash flow, working for the love of the process, for the love of the craft, but at the same time being able to take a step back and enjoy those things with my partner and my future family and whatever else that might entail.
Does that money for you buy you freedom?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you put money as a whole aside, I think the biggest wealth in life is freedom. The freedom of choice to do what you want, when you want, with whoever you want. And I would say in my current life now, that is my biggest wealth. My ability to have my slow mornings. I can wake up, I can go train, but I'm not commuting anywhere. I can kind of start on my own time as long as that work gets done. And yeah, every time, I buy another share or, you add more equity to that investment property, I feel like I'm almost buying a piece of my future back and buying my freedom later on.
You grew up believing the path to wealth was studying hard and getting a real job. Do you still feel that way?
No. I strongly believe it doesn't matter what you do. You could be a cleaner, but if you're the best cleaner in the world, you'll make your millions.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you all for being here. That's all we have time for. Thank you for your company. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.